Today I'm making a dish that I grew up eating that can be a bit confusing because of the name. Manicotti are a tube of pasta that can be filled with cheese or meat or various other fillings that, much like many other Italian-American dishes, doesn't seem to be very widespread in Italy, but became popular in America and spread on outwards to the rest of the world. The confusing thing is that manicotti can refer to tubes of dried pasta, and it can also refer to stuffed rolled crepes. Back in Italy, the most common name for these two things is cannelloni and crespelle, respectively. Now, technically, manicotti tubes and cannelloni tubes are a bit different. I'm not totally clear on the differences. I know that one can be ridged and one can be smooth. One's bigger, one's smaller. But today I'm making the crepes, which is what I grew up eating. And I'm going to make two versions of this. One that's more traditional Southern Italian style with a red sauce, and one that's a bit more northern influenced, but is equally as popular in Italy these days, which will be spinach filled, coated with a bechamel, and of course some cheese on both. I got started by making the crepes. Now, however you go about making these, it's going to be pretty simple. I just combined flour, milk, a little bit of salt, and a few eggs, until I got a fairly runny batter. I buttered my crepe pan, poured out a good amount of batter, and cooked it over medium heat until it was dry on both sides. Now, this definitely made for some delicious crepes, but the addition of milk made it taste a bit too cakey for my liking. These would definitely be good dessert crepes. And these crepes kind of tore apart a little bit too easy. You want them to have a little bit of stretch so that when you stuff them, they don't break apart. So this next batch, I'm using the same amount of flour, that was about 125 grams for about 6 crepes, and I'm replacing the milk with water so it doesn't add a cakey sweetness.
Yeah, my toes were getting cold when I was walking.
And I'm using more eggs this time, so the protein hopefully helps bind the pancakes together and make them a little bit more stretchy. And these ones turned out pretty well. So once those crepes were done, I started making my red sauce version. And I didn't want to make a full tray of both, so I just used some foil to divide the pan. Hopefully it's watertight enough to prevent any seepage from crossing it. So I'm going to make a basic pomarola, or tomato sauce, using 3 cloves of garlic, which many Italians would shudder at, but apparently American garlic is much more mild than Italian garlic, which is why you see Italian recipes calling for 1 clove of garlic, and that being totally sufficient. Let me know if you've had both, and if that is accurate, or if we're just garlic crazed in America. Either way, I'll heat up some olive oil over medium heat, add in those cloves whole, give them a good fry for a few minutes until they turn golden and release some of their aroma. Then I'll cover that up with a 32-ounce can, or about a liter of tomato puree. And this is definitely more of a traditional Italian-style sauce rather than Italian-American. So I'm using a puree rather than crushed tomatoes that I normally use. But I think using crushed tomatoes here would overpower the rest of the flavors. So this is what I'm going with. I'm going to rinse out the can with a little bit of water. This will help thin out the sauce so that we can cook it for longer without it reducing too much and getting too thick. I seasoned it with a teaspoon or so of salt. Give it a good stir. Bring it up to a simmer. And I'll also add in a few leaves of fresh basil. Stuff those below the surface so they can infuse into the sauce. And let it go for about a half an hour until all those flavors start to mingle. The rawness of the tomatoes gets cooked out. And after 30 minutes, it should have reduced back to the consistency of that original tomato puree. So I'll spoon a little bit of that onto the bottom of the baking dish. And now I'll work on the filling. I'm gonna add in about 250 milliliters or about a cup of ricotta. Definitely use the whole milk variety. I'll add in an egg. Season with some salt. And give it a good stir. I threw that into a Ziploc bag and cut off the corner to make a makeshift piping bag. Piped it onto the edge of one of the crepes. And rolled it on up.
Flip it over. And just keep on rolling. Don't drop it. Oh gosh.
And don't worry if you have a broken crepe like this one. Once you roll it up, it should hide the edges. Plus it'll be covered with cheese, so nobody will really notice or care too much. Once those are all rolled up, I'll nestle them into our baking dish. Spoon another layer of sauce on top. Grate some Parmesan on top of that. And now I'm going to add some mozzarella on top of that. Now, typically in baked dishes like this, I tend to use low moisture mozzarella, which, as its name implies, has lower moisture than fresh mozzarella. But I do like the flavor of fresh mozzarella, and this stuff that I get from a local cheesemaker that actually sells to most of the grocery stores in Brooklyn isn't kept in brine, so it doesn't leach as much liquid as the actual fresh stuff. And now we can move on with the white version of this. I made a basic bechamel by melting a few tablespoons of butter. Adding in an equal amount of flour. Mixing that thoroughly. Then adding in 10 times as much milk. So for this it was 50 grams of butter, 50 grams of flour, and 500 mils of milk. Stir that well so you don't have any lumps floating around. Cook it on medium-low and let it thicken for a few minutes. Shouldn't take long. You just want it to coat the back of your spatula. Then I seasoned with salt, as well as a fresh grating of nutmeg. And we're ready to spoon that onto the other side of the dish. Now the filling of this one is almost the same. Some ricotta, an egg, some salt, mix it all together, and then I'm going to blanch some spinach, just until it withers. I drained it out with some paper towel. Chopped it into small pieces, and mix that in with the ricotta mixture. Same deal, I made a piping bag with this. Squeezed it out into our crepes. And rolled them on up. And now everything else here is basically the same as the red sauce version, except instead of red sauce, you're using bechamel. So spoon some of that on top. Grind some parm. Tear some mozzarella. And I'll throw this into a preheated 175 Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit medium temperature oven for 20, 25, 30 minutes. Basically, you want the cheese to melt on top and hopefully get crispy. Mine wasn't as crispy as I wanted, so I threw it under the broiler for a few minutes. Maybe you want to go up in temperature to 190, 375, but that's really up to you and your oven. You can't really overcook this except for burning it, so do you. And these came out really nicely compared to what I'm used to. The bechamel version is very nice, very delicate, very light tasting. Nothing is overpowering or bold. And you know, if it was offered to me at dinner, I would definitely accept it. But if I'm gonna be making this for myself, I'd probably be making the red sauce version, because that is what I was raised on. And it's hard to tell in these shots, but you probably saw when I was rolling it up that the filling was kind of liquidy. So I checked a few recipes, and a lot of people add mozzarella into the filling. So I shredded up some low moisture mozzarella, added in an egg, as well as some parm, just for extra seasoning, and some ricotta. Whoops, I needed a bigger bowl. And you know, the consistency wasn't quite what I wanted, so I added another egg, which hopefully will thicken it up a little bit more. As the egg cooks, it'll add some protein, hopefully bind it together better. Season with some salt and pepper. And you can already see that the texture is much denser. And this batch was done in my toaster oven, so it definitely got some nice crisp on it, which I think is the best part. I mean, people ask for a corner piece of lasagna for a reason, so. And this did turn out a little bit thicker than the other version, but it was still a little bit soft compared to what I'm used to. So I'd say add in another egg on top of that and see where it gets you. But otherwise, this is just a delicious excuse to eat a ton of cheese.